Hello, everybody. It's Merlin here, and I wanted to say first of all, hello. I know it's been a little while. Been having some technical issues lately. My computer was kind of fried there, and I was kind of out of commission just for about a week or two, just trying to get it fixed, and I did successfully. And before that, just kind of been busy with stuff in general, but hopefully going to be able to get back sort of on schedule soon. But in the meantime, I wanted to just bring up the fact that I saw Joker yesterday. And I wanted to give you guys a brief review of that, kind of my thoughts about it. And it definitely took like a minute. Like I wanted to kind of ruminate on it because I honestly didn't know exactly what to think about it. I think that it's a Uh, I guess I can't say I thought it was bad. I thought it was actually a pretty well done movie overall. I think that first and foremost, Joaquin Phoenix's performance was, I think, undeniably well done. I think he did a really good job portraying the sort of tragedy of this character who's kind of going through a lot of issues with mental illness and kind of really portraying that very, very realistically, I think, for the most part. Like it seemed like he went to places that I feel like just were very believable in a lot of ways. So the acting from him, and I guess in comparison, I think with the directing in general, I think was overall pretty good with this. It was also a very well shot and edited movie. I think that the fact that they kind of set it in sort of a vague time, like it looked like it was the 1970s or 80s, just judging by the cars and the level of technology. I saw that he kind of had like a early VCR, so it made me think, okay, like maybe early mid 80s at most. But it kind of made a little more sense why some things kind of flew by. Like this is a time when maybe there was less support for things, and uh, it would have made it more feasible for somebody like the Joker to kind of come into being. It seemed a little more likely with some of the events in the film just based on a timeline about 30 years in the past or so. So that's the thing. This movie was kind of very grounded and believable in a lot of ways, which is probably the scariest thing about it. Um, and I thought the soundtrack was also pretty good as well. The costuming and makeup for him when he got in the Joker transformation was good. So that's the thing. I think that as a film, kind of emulating like Taxi Driver, early Scorsese work, it pretty clearly was. I think it was really kind of channeling that. From a film perspective, I think that it was dark and uncomfortable, but it wasn't bad. It was a well made film. I feel like from a film perspective, it was maybe not like the easiest film to view, but it was definitely uh, an immersive one, and that's definitely a compliment. As a comic book fan, I definitely think that there's always room for interpretation with different characters, and the Joker is no exception. And I know that this film might garner some controversy with that. I think this film is attempting to kind of show the Joker as if this kind of person did exist in the real world, how could he come to be? And I think this seems very believable in that sense, which is I know of course why it's so scary, but it's like I think it's probably the most realistic uh, comic book related film, at least Batman related, even more than the Dark Knight, because the Dark Knight trilogy was like grounded in reality, but it was still kind of like pushing it in some ways. This one seems like no, it's like wow. Which kind of brings up. I was actually watching with my girlfriend, and she actually pointed out some things that I didn't really think about initially. That kind of the problem with it from if you look at it as a comic book movie that's supposed to be tied into the Joker traditionally and the Batman world traditionally is actually when it could be more problematic. Uh, and I mean, I'm trying to be kind of open minded about it, but I could definitely see. I think that maybe some of my friends could have had an issue with it, but it's a different interpretation. So it's kind of like all shots are legal. It's not like so far fetched that I'm like, what are they doing? But it could make people a little uncomfortable. They I should like for like first of all, traditionally speaking, like if you think about when I think of the Joker, like typically, I mean, yes, sometimes it's interesting to think about his origin, like the Killing Joke was partially an inspiration for this movie, to see the more human aspects of the character. But typically, the Joker is kind of like this, force of evil. He's more of like an allegory. He and Batman kind of are like in this epic struggle of forces of good and evil, order and chaos, et cetera. And the Joker just kind of almost embodies that to the point where he's not human. He's just, you like to think of him as pure evil. And if you go by, like, I think, obviously the most popular interpretation is Mark Hamill's Joker. He was kind of always a bad guy even before he went completely crazy. So you kind of get the sense that, like, even though he's maniacal, he still is kind of a criminal mastermind, and he's got a lot of money, resources, and he's difficult to catch. That's why he's Batman's greatest supervillain, right? But this film, because it's so realistic, and if it's trying to be an origin of the Joker in a comic book sense, it's harder to believe because you're like, well, this guy's sloppy. He's not really a criminal mastermind. He just kind of has this very personal story with a lot of tragedy and delusion and break from reality and a lot of issues with depression and other things, these violent tendencies that come out because of his trauma and things he learns. And so it's like, okay, I could definitely see this happening, but you don't see this as a kind of person that would be a continuous criminal mastermind. He's sloppy and he doesn't have a lot of money or resources, and I guess he kind of sort of creates a movement, but by his vigilante actions. But even if that's how they went with it in this universe, I mean, it seems like it's just kind of an angry riot. Maybe he gets some followers after that, but he doesn't seem to evoke that kind of leadership, mob boss, mass terrorist mentality. Not really. He seems like just a somebody that just kind of went off I guess, the deep end for tragedy, and like anybody else could have. And he was just one person in this particular situation in time. And they kind of hint that it's like sort of the society that kind of let him down. And that was one thing I thought was kind of interesting about the movie. But I'll get back to that in a second. But basically, as a comic book thing, there's that. There's also the fact that they kind of play around a bit with the origin again, sort of, that there's a little more of a connection between him and Bruce Wayne. So Bruce Wayne's like 8, 9, 10 again, and this guy's like, he could be portraying a person in his 30s, but I don't know. I think Joaquin Phoenix is in his 40s or maybe pushing 50 or something. It's kind of vague, I'll say, but even so, he's probably got like at least a good 20, 25 years on Batman. So you're kind of like, okay, well, but if you're thinking about it like that, well, by the time he becomes Batman, this guy's already going to not be as much of a physical threat. Not that the Joker typically is, but it's still just like the age difference seems a little bit of a discrepancy there, which is kind of one of the issues I had with Gotham earlier on when that was on. So, so I mean, that kind of as a comic book issue, you're kind of like, that doesn't really make any sense. So, I mean, this could be once again an isolated story, so maybe it doesn't have to directly connect to that. But if it was going to, it's like it doesn't really work that well. So it's like this could just be the Joker in this universe, but will he even be really around for Batman? Because then you'd wonder, okay, if this is going to be a super gritty, realistic version of Batman, what would Batman be like? Because that's another issue I could guess people could kind of take with the movie if they really were big fans of the Waynes, who are typically kind of a little vague anyway. They kind of portrayed the Waynes as not exactly the most sympathetic of people. Like, I mean, they're not trying to go out of the way to say they're bad people, but they kind of connect them with like the rich and the kind of the well, how should I put it? The resentment that's kind of held between classes and how that might tie into a lot of social issues, and that discrepancy there. So they kind of like pinpoint the Waynes as a scapegoat for that, whether or not they exactly are. But Thomas Wayne, we see as not exactly like this nice beacon. We see kind of like the side that he could be kind of an a-hole, not the most sympathetic guy in some cases. And so there is that. And Bruce Wayne doesn't really seem like he's that. He seems like kind of a detached little kid already. And Alfred, in his one scene, kind of comes off. I mean, admittedly, it's a scene where they're kind of encountering Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, and he's trying to kind of like defend Bruce, but he still comes off being a little insensitive. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, like, you could say in that situation, all right, I can understand why you feel threatened, but you think of Alfred as being a nice, poised, refined gentleman. Just he didn't have much sympathy. Nobody had much sympathy for this guy. Um, and I guess That kind of ties into, I think, one thing. I don't know if this is really glamorizing the Joker's point of view. I don't think it's trying to. I think that it's almost trying to say that more than anything, that the Joker, this character, wanted to reach out for help, but he just never really got the help that he needed. Uh, so, I mean, that's kind of how this ultimately resolved. So, um, there was some violence in the movie. There were a couple violent, disturbing scenes for sure, but there wasn't as much of it as I thought there was going to be. There's a lot of buildup, which I thought was pretty interesting. Overall, I think the film was pretty well done. I have to think about it. I don't know if it's like my favorite performance as the Joker. I think it was very well written, as a like a exploration of this tragedy of the evolution of this person. I don't know if they want to make it sympathetic or at least understandable to how he got there, but trying to show the real human side of this kind of person if he did exist. I think it was successful at that, at showing the descent. But as far as if it was an actual comic book interpretation, it might be a little bit different, honestly. Uh, so I don't know. I think I think I still kind of I I'd have to still think about like how I would judge the performances in comparison to others because it is so different. But it was well done. Like I can't say that it wasn't well done at all. So I might have to think on that one before I really go back to it again. But no, it was still pretty enjoyable overall. Well, enjoyable the right word? It was a disturbing film. Like but it was definitely well made, and I think that it's kind of providing some interesting commentary and ideas. Uh, but it's definitely one that I'm still thinking about now, and trying to determine exactly how I feel about it. And I wonder how this film is going to hold up over time. What people are going to continue saying about it, getting different reactions. But it is interesting that we're like getting to the point now where we can kind of use superheroes and superhero films and kind of take them outside the traditional story structure of just the villain versus the hero. And movies have been trying to do that for a couple years now, and admittedly we're still using something like the Joker, who's a pretty iconic character, to try to explore some serious issues. But it's just really kind of a really artistic, gritty sort of film that isn't exactly even a comic book movie. So if you go into that expecting that, you might be surprised. Actually, a couple people left the theater because of a couple of scenes. I think it was getting disturbing, and after this particular scene of violence, I think two people actually left. So it, even though the atmosphere of the film and the content of the film, I think, were just very disturbing. So it's not your traditional comic book movie. It's not a feel good fun time exactly, which surprised me. I thought they were going to have a little more fun with exploring the villain of the character, but they were trying to show the most human elements. So, like, well done. But it, depending on what you're looking for, it definitely was surprising me a little bit. So overall, though, I'm glad I watched it. I think it was well made overall, and I applaud them for that. But if anybody else saw it, let me know what you guys thought about it. I am. I kind of need to get a lot of my stuff back on here. I kind of lost a couple podcasts and a couple drinkable alchemy videos on my computer because I had to replace the drivers. And I'm working on another film project, and I lost a couple things from that. I got most of the scenes from that, so I've got some things in there that I have to kind of get up. I got to get some editing software again. I basically have to put everything back on here. So, and I'm also back in class again. So, combination of that and the schedule, it's been like, okay, well, I'm hoping to get a couple more videos up. I've got some more Joe Loves Movies planned. I've got a new series I'm working on, kind of relation to that. I want to make some videos on. I want to do some podcasts and more, streams again. I know some people wanted those, so there'll be some things coming in the next couple months. I'm not going to pretend like it's going to be a regular schedule, but I'm still here. I'm still hoping to like do something with a Phantom group at some point, but we'll see again. Everybody's busy. You know how it is. But Merlin the Mighty still around. Send me some requests for videos, things you'd like me to talk about. I'll probably do a podcast or a stream talking about some of the shows I've been watching eventually. But all right, everybody, have a wonderful week. See ya. And of course, stay magical.